We have two record-breaking replays right here today, and we are going to try and learn as much as we can by taking a deep dive into each of these games and how these players managed to pull off a result like this. The first replay we have here today is in the Shptk, of course the tier 8 tank destroyer from the Czechoslovakian line, the premium, and of course this is a fantastic result. It is the Hesh monster with 100 pen and 420 alpha with the ability to reload in just a few seconds and making it one of the highest damage per minute vehicles at tier 8, if not the highest damage per minute vehicle if you are using those Hesh rounds effectively. And of course that means that you can have some outrageous damage results, and that's exactly what we're going to see within this first replay. Now what makes this tank even better is the fact that it isn't just in a tier 6 game, you know, where you're playing up against two tiers lower than you. This is actually in a bottom tier game against tier 9s, and that means that you are on the back foot straight away, and it's often not the case in which you get the highest damage results when you're in the top tier matchups, and that's because there's a lot more damage that you can find in these sorts of games. And of course in tier 9 up against paper tank destroyers like the Waffle Panzer IV, you can quickly rinse away a lot of their hit points and come away with results like you're going to see in this game. And of course being in the Shptk and the fact that this tank has really good penetration on both its standard rounds and its premium rounds, you're able to do really well. But it's not about the tank in today's video, it's about how you can play to maximize your damage and come away with, of course, a great result. Now, the first thing that we have in this game is, of course, taking into the forest on Murovanka is, of course, a good position for this sort of vehicle where you're able to, you know, unload a lot of shells, remain undetected, and hopefully be able to spot opponents that might be finding their way towards you. And once you've taken this position in Murovanka and you've successfully dealt with a lot of the tanks over on the left hand side in this forest area where you see all of the magic bushes, you can then work on all of the players that are going to be in where the Tiger 2 is in this game, and you're going to be able to remove them very quickly as you can use the bush mechanics that are over here, and then of course be very careful about tanks like the Waffle Panzer IV and the TDs that are usually camping at the back. But if they are spotted by your light tanks, which of course you're seeing here with a platoon mate in the EOC even 90, you can quickly build up that damage to have some really crazy amounts. Now granted, in this game there is still 17,600 hit points of damage left, and given the fact that he's managed to pick up 2,900 damage so far, he's pretty much taken most of it. And here you go, this is the sort of scenario you want to find yourself, pulling up, making sure to double bush, using both the tree and the bush in front to remain undetected even against the light tanks and of course the tank destroyers that are going to be camping. You don't want to be getting spotted at this point, and luckily manages to hit the links for 490. Really nice one there. And this is the ultimate dream. And instead of actually pushing up and trying to push the advantage, he's sticking well behind, making sure to use the cover of these trees, whilst also making sure that he doesn't ever fire when one of the trees is of course transparent, making it much easier to remain undetected and not having to rely on, you know, just having the pure camo value, but of course using the camo with the trees, which is what you want to do. Now unfortunately for the Scorpion G, he gets spotted again by the EOC even 90. Really good play by the friendly EOC who's pushing up, and of course now the Tiger 2 trying to get a shot onto him, does manage to get spotted earlier, but it doesn't really matter at this point since he's basically cleaned up this flank from all of the dangerous vehicles. And from this sort of position you love it to be in a Shptk. He tries to track the T-54, which is what you want to be doing, but unfortunately doesn't manage to do it. But at this point T-44's DPM is just lackluster, and he's not going to be able to successfully get too many more rounds into the Shptk, and only one more round comes out of the T-54, leaving the Shptk on a significantly less amount of hit points, but still, given the fact that he's done 7,500 damage, not a bad amount. But with the enemy tanks still on nearly 11,000 total damage within the game, you would probably be hoping to get a little bit more. The Skoda T50 YOLO is the T34-2, so there's no point in trying to farm him up, considering this game is an easy one for him to finish. But unfortunately the Skoda T50 doesn't actually go and managed to finish off the T34, and in fact leaves it down to the Shptk once again to try and finish him off. But he only lands one more shell, and with the teammates pushing up like the K91, the IS-3 and the Scorpion, I'm sure they'll be able to deal with him, especially given that the IS-3 is on full health. Either way, still manages to find that shell, doesn't manage to get any more high rolls within this game at that T-34, but now it's time to push onto the enemy's tanks, and you'll see that the EOC is actually pushed in over to where the TDs usually camp in B1 and A1, which is obviously where a nice position to get into, since then you can spot from behind them and keep everyone lit up, as well as allow the Shptk now to find him some shells on this UDES, and he lands a really nice one into the UDES there. And at this point it's time to push up behind all of these vehicles like the Conqueror, you're seeing the 50 TP, etc. And this is exactly what you want. Make sure that you're coming up from behind, flanking opponents, causing teammates to be able to hit the tanks that are turning for you, and then making sure that you're not giving them any easy shells to really reliably get any more damage. And you can see here, just desperately trying to find the last bit of damage in this game. Can he break the 10k mark? Yes, he can. And there you go, 10,000 damage in a tier 9 game in the Shptk. That is absolutely crazy, and definitely one of the highest games in the Shptk that I have ever seen, and it is definitely a record for this patch, and is in fact the highest damage record I could find for the last few patches within World of Tanks, if not all time. Now, the Shptk gameplay was unbelievable, as I'm sure you're well aware, but this replay is probably even better. And even though the Shptk is able to come away with a 10,000 damage result, given the fact that it has such a huge DPM and the fact that it was played so well within the forest and able to farm a lot of the lightly armoured vehicles, to be able to come away with such a result was insane. And hopefully you saw a few things that maybe you could use in your own gameplay, and if you did, then please do hit the subscribe button, and of course like this video to see plenty more gameplays and replays. And of course you'll be seeing me live on Twitch soon, so I'll leave a link to Twitch to be able to actually follow me on there, and of course you can see me live then. But key thing is that this replay is in a tank that you're probably not used to ever seeing within World of Tanks, and that is the Caernarvon, of course the tier 8 British heavy tank that is supposed to have armour. It's supposed to be able to deal with a lot of vehicles, but in today's current meta, given the fact that it's supposed to be this hold down meta where you can use your turret armour, yeah, it's still got a big cupola, which can be penned quite easily, and of course the side of the turret's pretty trash as well, and the hull armour is even worse. So yeah, the tank doesn't really typically play that well, but what happens is you can still use it very well if, of course, you know what you're doing. And that is exactly what we're trying to showcase in today's game, and how these world record attempts actually happen, where they're able to come away with these just insane results. And it's primarily down to knowing everything about their tank and being able to, you know, use your knowledge of the in-game things and use your knowledge of all of the in-game attributes that certain other tanks have, so that you can take advantage of them. And that is exactly what you're seeing here. Now, he's taken this position. Of course, hold down, it's harder for opponents to be able to hit him, and when you're playing up against tanks like the AE Phase 1, which have a lot of turret weak points, etc., then you're able to really do a good job against them. But AE Phase 1, of course, making sure that he is checking whether the AE Phase 1 has A, fired. If he has, then he can take the position to get hold down again and pre-aim, so that when the AE then moves around, he's got to at least take a shot, and that's exactly what he does here. So the AE pulls around that corner and he takes one shell, and then of course takes the second shell just moments later, as the reload of the Caernarvon is actually super good. So you can use this one tactic and it will make you I'm not going to say 10 times better, it will probably double your damage. Like the amount of times where I've thought, why am I playing so bad? It's often because I'm not actually using one of the key concepts to be able to get the damage, and that is often just knowing when people fire and keeping count of reloads and stuff like that, whereby, you know, if you're in something like the Caernarvon, you know that you can out reload a lot of the people in the game, especially if they're an autoloader. So why not actually take use of that and push when you need to be able to get this damage onto the opponents. Now you're seeing here great use of tracking the Object 263, kind of aligning himself such that he can then get the easy tracking shot 90 degrees towards the 263, whilst also moving so he can't be hit from the hill area, which is perfect, and that means that he's avoiding any further damage and he's able to farm up the 263 safely. And that is exactly what you want when playing something like the Caernarvon. You can see here the enemy Progetto also finding himself in the open, and unfortunately for him, he's going to find out that he is not safe even with a pixel hold like this. Now, Anyway, 3,000 damage done. Pretty good game in the Caernarvon, even if it was to all blow up right now. But, of course, it doesn't. That's why it's on the channel. But the key thing I think that I've missed within some of these replays recently is the kind of... A lot of them are obviously some of the best tanks in the game, but the Caernarvon is... No one is going to be saying that this tank is overpowered. Literally no one. And it's because of the fact that we are seeing the Caernarvon in today's replay as to why I think it's a really good example of when a fantastic player knows exactly how they can use the tank and comes away with the results that even the most overpowered tanks would be very, very happy with seeing in the game. Things like the BZ176. But I think that we can all learn something, and hopefully you guys are finding this enjoyable, or at least learning something from the videos that I'm doing. And of course, if you think that you want me to add anything, then let me know as well. But you're seeing here, he takes the aggressive push towards the T32, knowing full well T32 has a similar sort of alpha, or has slightly higher alpha, but he's not able to reload twice for every time that the Caernarvon actually hits him. So that means he's able to, you know, find himself in a nice position. He gets behind the T32 to avoid any potential Progetto 54 that could be over to the left. Luckily, Progetto is straight ahead anyway, so it's time to actually push towards the Panther 2, deal with this flank, and then he can turn around and try and deal with both the Shptk, the UDES 16, the T49, the Charioteer, and the Waffle Panzer 4. So once this flank is secured and the cap circle is safe so he doesn't get capped out, we all know how being capped out in this game really feels like, then yeah, it would be a fantastic one. But Panther 2 here, easy track of the Panther, getting some assistance damage whilst also then finishing him off, and yeah, picking up a ton of damage so far. But once again, it will continue, and with only 6,600 hit points left on the enemy team, you can see how influential these players are when they do get everything right. And how even in a game where you're kind of steamrolling the opponents, I mean it's 9-3 and they're up by 6 vehicles at this point in the game, and he's still picked up the majority of the damage that we've seen within this game. I mean maybe like a third of the damage done so far, or maybe even more than that, which is ridiculous in itself to say that one tank has managed to do that. But he continues his assault now on the rest of the vehicles on the enemy team. But of course, pushing out into the open field, not particularly the best idea, so instead finds himself going back into the central location so he can find the Shptk here. Luckily manages to see that he's on a low amount of hit points, so it's not going to be a problem to finish him off, and he finish him off exactly he does. So having done that, there's now the Waffle Panzer 4 that is quite a big threat. I mean, pushing into TDs, it's never fun, but luckily manages to find the shell on, of course, the UDES 16, spots the Waffle Panzer 4, who's moved into a much weirder position than where he was expecting him, hence the quick turnaround. And at this point, what you've got to do is put something between you and, of course, the hill where the majority of the enemy team tanks seem to be. Of course, T49 could have moved into various different positions. So instead, pulls up to this spot, uses the bushes. It's a fantastic spot in the late game to be able to get some side shots if anyone still remains on the hill on the enemy team. And, of course, staying well behind the bushes to avoid taking any extra damage. You can see here managing to find this T49, easy couple of shells into him, misses that final one, but it doesn't really matter, and now he's just waiting to see if he can get a free shot into the UDES 16. But of course there are still some tanks left on the enemy team that have not been spotted, and that is of course the Shptk, and you don't want to be getting caught out by the Shptk. I mean, you've seen in the first replay that you don't want to get caught out by a Shptk, and they can quickly rinse away the last remaining hit points that you've got on your vehicle. So instead, he sits back and uses this bushes to assess the situation. Unfortunately, does actually pull too far forward there, which means he gets spotted, but now he's just trying to pixel the UDES over that hill area, and unfortunately doesn't manage to do it. UDES looks like he's got the stock turret anyway, so you could probably pen that quite easily if he managed to get it. It's a much higher profile turret on the tier 9 there, and manages to hopefully get a few shells. Obviously seeing his annoyance with the shaking of the rounds here, he's absolutely fuming, as I'm sure I would be as well if I'd had a game like this. And yeah, he's just he's getting shafted by the RNG gods, but don't worry, it does actually pick up here now, and a nice little 268 roll there finally. And then second shell goes straight into him too. And the Udes really can't do much here. If he does actually move down, he's not really going to be able to do anything. And so he's stuck between a rock and a Caernarvon. And of course the Caernarvon's coming out on top. But the Waffle Panzer IV has now moved up, and he knows this straight away. And so instead of sitting back on his laurels, trying to get that shot on, of course, the easy target, is going after the Waffle Panzer IV. Since this is a crucial tank to get rid of, it can half health you, and especially if it's got the 15cm, then yeah, it can definitely be a nuisance. He loads a HE round to finish him off in just one shell, perfect use of that, and then finally trying to get the Shptk. But unfortunately, the Shptk has now gone undetected, and the Charioteer is actually in a completely different position to where he was expecting him to be, and he loads a HE round to pen the Caernarvon. So definitely would have been annoyed about that one, but the AMX-65T is appearing to actually push up towards the Charioteer. Now it's time to finish him off, but unfortunately Charioteer then manages to pen him with the Hesh round by the looks of things, and unfortunately no easy shell into him. And going from a position where it looks like it's going to be a steamroll to a position where it looks like they're going to get steamrolled, yeah, I mean, not particularly the greatest trades at the end of the game by a lot of his friendly team. And of course now trying to play much more passively and making sure that they don't make any more mistakes when pushing in. But that's what happens when you try and push into a Shptk and vehicles like that, and the T-49, who's just going to be able to outspot you in a lot of cases. Looks like the Shptk is directly in front of him. He's trying to get up behind this area here, but he's taking a ton of rounds in the process, and not particularly too nice. But he may be able to finish off the T-49. Lands one shell, but that's about it. Now, with two tanks either side of you, the Charioteer and the Shptk both can pull up and try and find an angle on you, and when you've only really got some cover between you on the left hand side with the Shptk, you really have to hope that your team are going to be able to help you out, because you can't really push all too much. He does decide to make his way forward so that he isn't able to be hit or high up, so that the Charioteer can maybe find a shot over the building to his right. So perfect play there. And now he's just waiting really for his team to slowly push up and support him on either of the flanks. So he does actually get spotted by the Charioteer, and the Charioteer's moved up to try and find out where the Caernarvon is and try and remove him from the game. But luckily the Ferdinand is in support, and hoping that the Ferdinand can at least get one shell on the Charioteer to get rid of him, and then he can focus on getting this Shptk out of the little campy magic forest that of course all of the maps seem to have. And of course with the Charioteer now in the central location, and he actually finishes off the Ferdinand, it's got to be a really hard carry to be able to pull it off. So what do you do in this scenario? Well, the Charioteer still thinks that you are in the position where he was previously, and unfortunately does actually spot him, and this is really risky now with the Charioteer out and about, and with so many bushes around, it just simply is a case of if the Charioteer is loading his Hesh rounds, he's going to be able to splash the Caernarvon at this point. But with the Type 61 also pushing up and the team having 34 hit points between them, I mean, you'd expect that the enemy team are going to come away with a win. But because the Caernarvon knows exactly the sorts of plays that he needs to be making at this point, which is essentially trying to help out the Type 60, you're seeing here he manages to actually get a one shell into him. He must be trying to at least go for the tracks. Maybe he can finish him off. He doesn't manage to. But the Charioteer, obviously knowing full well that he now needs to go to help out his team and to make sure that he's at least trading 1-for-1 with the Caernarvon when the Shptk comes, but he now knows and realises that it's time to just go. The Charioteer obviously rushing to try and finish off the Caernarvon, and actually ends up managing to gift the Caernarvon 2 shells, meaning that it only takes one more. He's fired. Now is the opportunity to try and get this Charioteer out of the game. That is exactly what you want to do. Put a bit of pressure. Charioteer now obviously not knowing what to do, and he tries to come around the corner, but of course, don't know what he was attempting there. The Caernarvon was obviously pre-aiming him coming around that corner, and yeah, unfortunately the Shptk comes just that millisecond too early and finishes off the Caernarvon. But 8,775 damage done, and actually 9,000 total damage done, because he managed to pick up a free shot on the charioteer when he was blind. So yeah, 9,000 damage in the Caernarvon, unfortunately losing, but still, I mean, just 2 insane replays